Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, sponsored by ACR Poker, where this month we have our exclusive OSS XL. What makes it XL is $50 million in guaranteed tournament prize pools. There's nothing else like it right now on the internet. You got to check it out. If you're not yet playing on ACR, you should click the link in the description of this podcast and get a first-time deposit bonus of up to $2,000 by using the promo code TPE. I'm Clayton Fletcher in New York City, and today I am bringing you one of our most sought-after guests. He is one of the all-time, if we had a Mount Rushmore Hall of Fame of all the TPE guests over the years, this guy would have to be one of the four heads carved in stone. He is a excellent tournament poker player. He's also a coach. He has two podcasts, the Thinking Poker podcast, and the other one is a strategy-only podcast, and that he's going to tell us a little bit about. You guys know by now I'm talking about the great Andrew Brokos. Andrew, how you been, my friend?
Hello again, everyone. I've been well, and I'm excited to be talking to you again, and also to be talking to the TPE community. It used to be that I was talking to them monthly when I put out my videos, but it's been a little while since I've had a chance to make videos, so I'm excited to talk to the TPE community again. That was my strategy home for like 10 years.
For 10 years? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're basically, to this day, one of the most popular coaches on TPE, even though you haven't done a video for us in quite a while.
Well, it just occurred to me too that I might have met him anyway, but I met Carlos, who now co-hosts the podcast with me, is one of my best friends. Important partner both like in life and in my professional life, and that was all through TPE.
Yeah. I mean, TPE is what connects us all, and it's a beautiful thing. But tell us about your podcast. I mean, everybody knows the Thinking Poker podcast, consistently been one of the best poker podcasts around for many, many years. I believe it's more than 10 years now, correct?
Yeah, we just had our 10-year anniversary. We started in late 2011, or no, late 2012 we started.
Right, but and that's incredible. Just having a podcast last more than 2 episodes is it puts you in the top 10%, I believe. So 10 years is quite an accomplishment. But what is the second podcast that you're recording?
Yeah, so there's also Thinking Poker Daily, which is we do still usually have a strategy segment on the regular Thinking Poker podcast, but that is primarily an interview show, and the interviews, even when they're with poker people, are not necessarily strategy focused. It really depends on who the guest is. Occasionally the interviews are with people who don't even have only a tenuous connection to the poker world, but they're just people that Carlos or I want to talk to. So then the Thinking Poker Daily is really the place. I mean, that's pure strategy. We put those shows out 5 days a week. It's for supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/thinkingpokerdaily if you're interested in getting in on this. And we say it's 10 minutes. I would say our average is probably more like closer to 15 minutes for how long these episodes actually are, because we like to talk and we like to talk to each other. But yeah, so people patrons can submit hands or theory questions. We love theory questions, and we just pick one a day. We sit down, do it like a 2-hour session, try to bang out like 10 of them, and then just have them queued up for 2 weeks. And every day you get 10 or 15 minutes of Carlos and me just diving straight into the strategy. None of the stupid chit chat like we're doing right now. No boring guest interviews where we talk about things that aren't poker strategy. Just straight into it, and it's very fun and informative, I think.
Get right to it for the player on the go who doesn't want to hear any boring chit chat. Get right to the meat and potatoes, right?
Yeah, or who also wants to hear the boring chit chat, right? I mean, we plenty of people listen to the regular show, but then they also want their daily hit of strategy.
Absolutely. You're also an author, a very successful author. You have Play Optimal Poker, Volume 1 and 2. What else is coming up for you in terms of the publishing angle. You have any more books we should be on the lookout for?
Now, the book, I'm glad that I wrote the books that I did. I wouldn't rule out that I'm going to write another book, but it's a lot of work. And it's, I don't think it's more remunerative than other things that I'm doing. I mean, there's intangible benefits to having written a book, but I'm doing a ton of poker writing right now for the GTO Wizard blog, which has been incredibly rewarding. GTO Wizard offers such good tools for analyzing hands, but specifically for visualizing, because I was very aware of this as being a bit of a weakness in Play Optimal Poker. I'm a very verbal person, but I know everyone is not, and I'm not great myself at creating visual representations of concepts. And so I don't have to do a lot of that. The GTO Wizard blog, I can just write the strategy stuff that I want to write, and then they have people who insert visuals to jazz it up, I guess, or they'll do graphs and things to illustrate concepts. So there are times where I feel like reading back over an article that I wrote, I learn new things. Just because seeing the visuals that they add helps me better understand the content. So that's where I'm doing most of my writing these days.
That's great. Yeah, and so many of our guests that have come on to this podcast have sung the praises of GTO Wizard and what a great product it is. So it's nice to hear you adding to that praise. One of your strengths as a coach, as a teacher, as an author, as someone that can help others get better at poker is that you have actually studied teaching as a subject, and I think a lot of coaches don't go that far into it. So
studied is actually kind of a strong word there. I mean, I didn't go to school for teaching. I've worked in classrooms. I've worked alongside teachers. I've seen teachers who are very effective, and I've talked to teachers about teaching. Now, Carlos, my podcast co-host, he was actually a teacher and has studied teaching. But I have a lot of respect for teachers, so I want to be careful about not quite putting myself in their class. But I do think I have more background in formal education training than your typical poker teacher or coach.
Yeah, that's fair. It's not that you have a teacher certificate or a master's degree in education, but you have definitely kind of gone out of your way to learn that different people, even what you just said about the visuals, different people learn in different ways. And part of the job of a coach or a teacher, I think, is to figure out what language your student speaks.
Yeah, being able to explain things. I think about this all the time because we've done so many episodes of, Thinking Poker Daily, for instance, and you do kind of feel like you're answering the same question over and over again. And I guess the lazy way of handling that is be we already answered that. But it's well, clearly you didn't, because people are still asking. So maybe you need to explain it a different way, or some people didn't get it. It's the same thing when I'm coaching. Sometimes I feel like the students I'm working with are asking me the same question over and over again, but that's not on them as a student. That's on me as a teacher to say, okay, they need to have this explained to them a different way than what you've already done.
For sure. Well, that's great. Andrew, I know that you're on a schedule. I'm on a schedule. So why don't we do what you suggested earlier and cut to the chase and get to the strategy segment that 99% of our listeners are here for in the first place. It's great to have you back. I know that you've been playing quite a bit on ACR, which is, of course, we're very proud to have ACR as the sponsor of this podcast. Before we get to your hand, though, I did want to ask you, have you been playing live at all? To my knowledge, you haven't been back to the World Series of Poker since before COVID. Is that a specific choice that you've made?
It is, yeah. I'm. If you want to play poker with Andrew Brokos, exclusively on ACR.
Okay, well there you go. That's a great endorsement for our sponsor right there.
To be fair, I don't recommend playing poker with Andrew Brokos. I'm pretty good at it. But.
Touche. Very good point, actually. All right. So, what kind of tournament was this hand from?
This was from This must have been one of the $200 Sunday tournaments on America's Card Room, which I really like the Sunday schedule on there. This hand starts with me having 20-ish big blinds, and I open from under the gun with Queen Jack offsuit.
Okay, so we can right away get into whether that's a good idea. So I'm sure that is solver approved, especially isn't it an 8-handed table?
Yeah, that's a very important point. It's an 8-handed table, and I only have 20 big blinds. So this is not a hand that I would open if I had 60 big blinds. With this stack size, the key, any early street decision is about how well does this hand give me the tools that I will need to handle the situations I'm going to be in later. So in a single raise pot, if I make top pair with Queen Jack, which Queen Jack's fairly good at making top pair, and you get a decent kicker to go along with it. If you make a pair, it's often the best pair. With 20 big blinds, I'm going to feel okay about stacking off with that. If I had 60 big blinds, I would not be looking to stack off with top pair. And Queen Jack offsuit is not very good at making anything other than top pair. So from later position, again, it might be okay. Like a button versus big blind, if it's 60 big blinds deep, I make top pair with Queen Jack, I'm going to feel good about that. But from an under the gun open, this is a hand that I would only play when shallow. And then there's some different hands, like a 7-8 suited or something, that will perform better when I'm deeper. So I might open that if I have 60 big blinds, but not the Queen Jack offsuit, and then that flips as I get shallower. I'd rather just have 2 big cards and not worry so much about suitedness and connectedness.
So right there already, I think some of our listeners might be surprised, because you may have heard kind of the age-old prevailing wisdom is that you're supposed to tighten up your ranges as stacks get short. But I think when it comes to a top pair hand, because the problem of being out of position is magnified when you have more chips, then I think that's what makes this an open rather than a fold as it would be with 60 bigs.
That's right. I don't think it's really the case that your pre-flop raise or your VPIP should go down as you get shallower. It's just that you play different hands. So some hands are less good to open, but then other hands are more good. So from early position, I think you actually want to VPIP slightly more hands when you're shallow for exactly the reason that you said, because it is your position is less of a disadvantage, and conversely, you're going to VPIP slightly less on the button because being the button is less advantageous when you're deep. So some hands that were profitable because you knew that you're going to have opportunities to play turns and rivers with position, those hands are not going to be profitable when you only have 15 or 20 big blinds.
Excellent. So are you a 2.2x guy, a 2.5x guy, or just a min raise guy, or does that depend?
Mostly a min raise guy. I think that it doesn't matter that much when you're deeper. I think it does matter once you get this shallow. When you have 20 big blinds, or even if you have more, but like a lot of the people behind you have 20-ish big blind or fewer, you don't get called that often. Often people just shove on you if they're going to contest a pot with you, which means that if you have aces or whatever big hand that you're happy about and you want action with, you're going to win the same amount whether you raise 2x or 2.5x. If I have a hand like Queen Jack offsuit that I'm going to be folding to a re-raise, I would rather lose 2 big blinds than 2.2 big blinds. So I think that when you're deeper, it doesn't make that big of a difference. When you're shallow, I think it is important to be making very small opens.
Excellent. So, before we get on with the action, just a couple more questions about the situation. Do you remember how close you were to the money, if at all? And also, do you remember whether the table was particularly aggressive or good or bad or anything about kind of the table composition?
I would say it must not have been like overly aggressive, or I probably wouldn't have opened this. I mean, you did right. Correctly flag. Like this is the one of the very worst hands I would open from this position, and I think it's close enough. Even at 20 big blinds, it's close enough that if I thought, this table is just like super loose and aggressive, I just wouldn't open it in the first place. Other than that, looking at the names of the players at the table now, I don't recognize any of them, and I do know most of the or I at least recognize. I see a lot of familiar faces and familiar screen names on ACR, so I think it must not have been too tough of a table. Looking at the sizes of the blinds, I think we were probably not super close to the bubble. I late register most things that I play on ACR, so my guess is there was probably 25% of the field remaining, which is not trivial. I mean, there are some ICM effects when you get to this point, but I don't think it influenced my decision too much.
Yeah, so I do happen to recognize one of the names at your table. I'm not going to say the name in case, just to protect the player. But there is a player from Serbia on your immediate right in seat 2 that I have tangled with quite a bit on the site in the higher stakes buy-ins, and I think he's pretty tough. Yeah,
that's fair. He is in the big blind, so that should influence why I'm opening a little bit. But I think the prospects, it's difficult to outplay me with 20 big blinds. Right? When we're deeper, a tough player has more room to outplay me. When we're really shallow, most decisions I feel like are pretty trivial. Although this hand ends up not being trivial, which is why we're talking about it.
Of course. So interesting about the late reg angle. So before we get on with it here, Andrew, Why is it that you, generally speaking, choose to late register most of the tournaments that you play on ACR Poker?
Some of it is quality of life. Like the late registration is so long on those tournaments that if you start on time, you're playing literally for 6 hours before you're like on the bubble. And so I would just rather get down to it.
Right.
If I'm going to double up, I'm going to double up. And if I'm not, then I'll go do something else and not spend 6 hours, waiting to find out whether I'm in cash. So that's part of it. But I do think there are significant ICM benefits. I mean, I think at this point, this is beyond debate. Like there are significant ICM benefits to late registering. The only question is your edge so big in playing the early levels that you are winning even more than what is the ICM benefit of just late registering? And I think the answer to that question is probably yes in a tournament like this one, but I don't think it's that big. So it's kind of like, I could be making, I don't know, maybe I'd make an extra like $15 an hour if I started on time as opposed to just late registered. And like, I don't know, there's a lot of things I could do to make $15 an hour if I really wanted to do that, and there's just other things I'd rather, like I'm going to make way more than that writing a GTA Wizard article than I am grinding the early stages of a $200 tournament.
Yeah, so as a professional, you kind of want to look at, well, what is my hourly rate for doing this as opposed to not doing this? And you guys have heard of tournament EV and chip EV. Well, he's talking about life EV, and that's important too.
Yeah, so I think that distinction you made is a very important one. I know that for some people, you're playing poker recreationally, and of course you want to win money, but it's mostly just like you want opportunities to play. And so, for that person, it may well make sense to start on time because for the same buy-in, you're getting to play more hours. For me, like I play plenty of hours of poker. Like I don't feel the need to add more poker. So I'm just trying to think about like what's the highest hourly rate thing that I can be doing when I am working, because this is my job. And so I do think that it's playing the early levels of these tournaments does not provide a particularly good EV. I think for the bigger buy-ins, like when they have like the Venom or just some of the like 2650s that run on ACR that draw relatively tough fields, I think it's downright plus EV to just late register. I try to register so that I have enough time. If I do get unlucky and I lose my initial flip or whatever, I have time to re-enter. But I think it's, I don't think I have such a big edge in the early stages of those tournaments that I want to take on the variance of playing the early stages.
Very good. And so in doing so, that when you buy in, you're obviously going to have a well below average stack because, so many players are already gone that the average stack itself has gone much higher. But if you do double up, then you'll kind of be right in the mix, and then that's really what we're looking for when we late reg, is just to maybe double up once to make sure we get into the money and then see what we can do from there.
Yeah, and I will say that, I have fewer chips than the average player who is still in the tournament.
You have a lot more than the ones who are out, though.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. I mean, if you think of it as, are you more likely to min cash, for instance? Are you more likely to min cash if you start on time or if you late register? I think the answer is if you late register. If we ignore re-entries, I mean, obviously if you can re-enter, you can have a better chance if you start on time. But if you're just playing a single entry, you're more likely to min cash if you late register, because you're cutting off all those times. Like, sure, sometimes you when you come into the bubble with like 10x starting stack or whatever because you started on time, but like plenty of times you just bust, and I'm skipping past all of those. I'm skipping 5 hours of opportunities to get eliminated, and lots of other people are getting eliminated in that time. And as soon as I buy in, I'm collecting little pieces of EV from all those players who have already busted. So the chips that I'm buying, because I get to buy them 5 hours into the tournament, I'm getting the same number of chips as anyone else. I'm paying the same $215. I'm getting the same starting chips that they did, but my chips are worth more than theirs were worth when they bought them.
Well, see, I mean, it's just not refutable, this logic. So when you add that together with the life EV, I say as long as they're going to continue to let us buy in late, we might as well buy in late when it makes sense. If it makes sense for you as an individual, and one thing you've talked about a lot in your writing, Andrew, is that different people play poker for different reasons. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're there for recreation, you if you just enjoy the game more, if you get to start the tournament right at the beginning, then by all means do that. But, you do make a very, very strong case for late regging, especially in these tougher fields, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do it. We've got, I'll put numbers on it because some of our listeners learn in different ways. You say 20 big blinds. Let's put actual numbers. The small blind is 1750. The big blind is 3500. And each player posts a 425 ante. And so we are min raising under the gun with the queen of clubs and jack of spades. Andrew raises under the gun to 7,000. And let's see, it folds around to who?
That looks like the cutoff.
Okay, and he calls. And then the player that I mentioned, having some familiarity with, also calls from seat 2. So we're going to be in a three-way pot with Hero holding the queen of clubs, jack of spades. And the flop comes the queen of diamonds, 9 of clubs, 5 of diamonds. So queen 9-5. And we've got top pair with a jack kicker, some nebulous straight possibilities, I suppose. So look, we said, we're trying to make top pair. We have 20 big blinds. So this is obviously an above average flop for us. The big blind checks. Is there any reason not to bet, Andrew?
In a three-way pot, I'm never going to fault you for checking. There's very few hands that I think it's correct to just to automatically bet in a multi-way situation. But this is very different from, playing heads up against the big blind. That's really the classic time where you can just sort of get away with, just bet my whole range. And in many spots, that's fine. Even if it's not quite optimal, it's fine. If you're heads up at a position, generally not a good idea to just blindly bet the flop. If you're playing a multi-way pot, especially if you do not have position on everyone in the pot, you shouldn't just be blindly betting. And one of the things that goes along with that is, if you're going to be checking a lot of your weaker hands or even some of your more marginal hands, then you should consider checking some of your better hands as well. So I think that this exact hand is one of the best hands to bet in this situation. It's both a quite strong hand. I mentioned, this is kind of what I was looking for. I do think it's a good enough hand to stack off. I feel better stacking off in a heads up pot than a multi-way pot. I do think right now the hand is still strong enough to stack. I didn't get 3-bet pre-flop, so that makes a lot of the hands that could beat me, the aces, kings, ace, queen, pocket nines, those are all pretty unlikely. So I do think it's pretty likely that I have the best hand, but I also do benefit to some degree from denying equity, from causing people to fold a live ace or a live king or a backdoor flush draw. One thing that'll often happen in a multi-way pot is one person will call you and one person will fold. And that person who folded, even if they didn't fold a very good hand, they still folded anywhere from a 5 to a 20% chance of winning the pot, depending on what they folded. And you and that other person who called, you get to chop up that third person's dead money. So you don't need necessarily the best hand to bet in a multi-way situation, but you do need a hand that will do fairly well when called. It's hard to make two people fold, so you shouldn't really be just betting total airball ace 4 of spades or something on this board where you have basically no chance of winning if you're called. That's not going to be a hand that you should ever really bet. You need to have either a decent chance of already having the best hand or a decent chance of drawing to the best hand, because it's not very likely that you're going to cause two people to fold. So you want to bet hands that have decent equity when called and that also benefit to some degree from causing at least one player to fold. And I think this hand ticks both of those boxes.
For sure, and well said. So again, with the numbers, the main pot is about 26K. We've got something like 64K in our stack. So our SPR is under 3. We've got 2 opponents. We've got top pair. Yeah, I wouldn't get too excited if it goes bet, call, because it's a little tough to know where you are. And like you say, you'd rather not have 2 opponents. But at the same time, if we bet twice, we're probably going to feel pretty committed to this pot, especially if we still have top pair at that point. Yeah, I don't know. I guess, I would put out a bet, maybe 85, 9K, something like that. What did you do?
So 85 or 9K would be about 1/3 pot. I bet 52.50, which is 20% pot. I don't have a real strong, we don't have great multi-way, or I at least don't have access to a good multi-way solver right now. So my grasp of theory in multi-way pots is a little dicier than my grasp of theory in heads up pots, but small bets are the way to go. And small, again, I bet 20% pot here. And the reason for this is that I mean, it's kind of related to what I said before of you really can't bet air, not profitably, and no one is going to expect you to have air if you make a big bet. So, the big bets really should be more polar. The bigger you bet, the more your range should be sort of a nuts or air type of range. And because you can't bet air in multi-way pots, if you were to make a big bet, which is not what you suggested, but if you were to like pot it here, there's no way that anyone could perceive that as a bluff. Like the very weakest that could possibly be is some sort of giant draw, like a king jack of diamonds or something where you have like a gut shot and a flush draw. You can't make a bet like that with nothing. So if you make a huge bet, you're basically screaming like, I have a very strong hand. And because I want to be able to bet hands like queen jack, where, as you said, like if I bet big and two people call me, I'm not going to feel very good about it. So I want to be able to bet this more kind of merged range where I'm benefiting to some degree from folds and to some degree from calls. I want to be able to make thin bets with queen jack, probably with like ace 9, with jack 10, king jack, king 10, where I have some kind of straight draw plus like potentially live overcards. Because I'm going to be betting a kind of equity dense but marginal range, I want to use a small size. The other thing about small sizes in multi-way pots is you get a disproportionate amount of fold equity. So when I bet 1/5 pot, right, the player in the cutoff who has position on me, they're getting 6-1 immediate odds, but they can't just call any hand that they think has, what is that, like 17% equity or something?
Right.
Like, they can't just do that because there's still a third player behind them. So they have to play tighter than the pot odds alone dictate, which means that I'm getting fold equity disproportionate to the amount of money that I bet. Like small bets are very efficient in multi-way pots. I mean, it's true that of course I'm going to get fewer folds than if I bet 15K or whatever, but I'm not going to get 1/3 as many folds. Like I'm going to get folds out of proportion to the risk that I'm taking on. And with this hand, I'm not trying to make any good hands fold anyway. Like I'm just trying to the extent that I'm benefiting from folds, as I said, it's just getting people to fold like a single live overcard or a backdoor draw or something. So I think my hand is a great example of one that really doesn't want or need to make a large bet. And there's plenty of other hands I'd want to bet in this situation also that are going to feel fine putting in 1/5 of the pot and getting the benefits of that, and would not be doing so well if they bet larger and got called.
So, Andrew, I have to tell you this real quick. Our listeners on the TPE Discord, which, by the way, guys, if you're not yet on the Tournament Poker Edge Discord, there's a link in the description. You can join for free and join the conversation that we have after the podcast about the hands, about the guests, about everything, and everything else TPE related. I'm known on the Discord as a Andrew Brokos stan. So without embarrassing you too much, I'm going to say nothing you just said is going to change the fact that I am an Andrew Brokos stan. I love hearing you talk poker and the way you see things that.
Didn't Stan ultimately set out to kill his hero?
Okay, that's where I'll draw the line. Right before actually trying to kill you. I think I'm just going to make you a nice recording and send it to you. No, so what's going on here is you're showing me things and explaining them so clearly in a way that, you and I speak the same language when it comes to poker. So that's why I've always enjoyed, whether it's your writing, your videos, everything about you and poker. Everybody knows you're my number one guy in that way. So now if we look at the conventional wisdom, would be, there's so many draws available. There are 2 diamonds on the board, any number of straight draws possible, an open ender, jack 10, 8-7, 7-6. There's all kinds of draws, king jack. So aren't we worried about pricing somebody in? Why is it not important, in other words, to protect my top pair with my shortish, medium short stack when I have 2 opponents and it's a fairly wet board?
Those draws are actually one of the reasons I like betting small. So if the either player, but the in-position player would be the more troublesome one because of their position. If I bet and they call, many turns are going to be difficult for me to play. So I don't think that they're folding to, like, even if I were to bet like 2/3 pot or something, I still don't think they're folding a diamond draw. They're not folding jack 10. They're probably not even folding king jack or king 10. So I'm not going to protect against those hands because they're not folding. I will grow the pot against those hands, and equity wise, I may or may not be a favorite. Like I'm a favorite against King Jack. I'm not necessarily a favorite against diamonds. It depends on what the diamonds are. But in any event, I'm not a big favorite against those hands, equity-wise. And by equity-wise, I mean if we just ran the numbers hot and cold and we didn't have to worry about future betting. But I am worried about future betting. I'm going to have to play turns and rivers. And I would rather have ace-4 of diamonds in position than queen-jack offsuit out of position in this spot, even if the queen-jack is a small favorite. And I think it is, but not by much. But like I would rather be the person in position holding ace-4 of diamonds. So if I make a large bet here and I get called by ace-4 of diamonds, especially if they have position on me, I'm not protecting anything. They're not folding away that equity. I'm bloating a pot that I am not favored to win. I might lose the pot by them hitting a diamond. I might lose the pot by them bluffing me out on some other scary card. But because I'm out of position, I have to assume that I'm going to under-realize my equity, and the in-position player is going to over-realize their equity. So it's really not in my interest to bloat the pot against those hands.
Interesting. So with that in mind, Andrew, many players would probably raise with a draw like ace-4 of diamonds. Without getting into whether or not that's correct with two opponents, it does happen a lot. So is the plan to get all in if we get raised here on the flop?
This is one of the other nice things about betting small. Is probably yes. If the action goes like I bet cutoff raises, big blind folds, then yeah, I'd be looking to shove. As you said, there's lots of draws they could be raising. I don't think it's very likely that they have a better hand. I mean, maybe they slow played aces pre-flop. The stack sizes are reasonable for it, but for the most part, I think hands that dominate me would have 3-bet pre-flop. So I would feel okay getting in against a button, and it eliminates the problem I just described of if I can just get it all in on a coin flip right now from out of position, that's a good outcome, as opposed to having to play the turn and river at a disadvantage.
Yeah, at least if you get a coin flip on the flop, you don't have to worry about not realizing your equity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, but a different thing that could happen is, what if I bet and the button raises and the big blind shoves?
Well, now we can fold.
Now, you're right. I want to fold, and I want to fold with as little invested as possible. So one of the things that I'm doing by betting small is I'm giving myself more flexibility. I'm risking very little to I'm going to have a great deal more information before the action is back on me to decide what I want to do. And the same, I mean, another important piece of information is going to be seeing the turn card. And some turns, I'm not going to feel so good about my hand anymore, and I'm going to be happy that I didn't put more money than this in the pot. Other turns, I'm going to feel like, okay, I didn't get raised on the flop, and this was a very safe turn. Now I can feel quite confident that I have the best hand, and I can proceed with more confidence than I could on the flop.
That makes perfect sense. All right, so we do bet and both players call, which was one of the outcomes I was concerned about, but I guess it doesn't mean as much as it might had we bet bigger. Right? I'm not necessarily worried that my queen jack is no good. I think it's still good a large amount of the time, don't you?
I feel better about queen jack now than I did before I bet.
Right.
I think no one, because before I bet, there's still a chance that someone has a strong hand that they just haven't had a chance to raise yet. Once I bet, especially only betting this small, and no one chooses to raise me, like the button is going to raise a better hand than queen jack, like damn near every time, because he's worried about not pricing in the big blind. And then the big blind, once he sees like bet and call, if he has a set or something, like he's going to want to raise that. So not getting raised on the flop, I think tells me right now I'm 98% to have the best hand. Now that could easily change on the turn because with two players out there, it wouldn't be hard for someone to draw out of me on this board. But right now, I think it's extremely likely that I have the best hand, so I can play the turn now armed with that information.
Makes a lot of sense. And now we have about 59,000 remaining in our stack with about 42,000 in the main pot, and we're basically hoping for a safe turn card. And the turn comes the tray of clubs, pretty safe. So our board is now queen of diamonds, 9 of clubs, 5 of diamonds, tray of clubs. So 2 diamonds, 2 clubs, queen 9, 5 tray. And again, the big blind checks. Now, Andrew, I'm assuming we're going to bet again. What I would probably do in this scenario is overbet shove. And I have a feeling that you're going to do something else.
Yeah. I ended up betting like a third pot or so. So bigger than I bet on the flop, which was the 5th pot, but still on the small side. And at this point, I'm really proceeding as though I have I have a hand so good that I'm not really trying to blow people out. So, on the flop, I was saying, like, I might rather have ace four the diamonds than queen jack offsuit. Like, once ace four exactly has turned to gut shot, but like,
right.
For the turn card, this is one of the best turn cards I could ask for. Like, this is probably a better turn than a jack would be. Even though a jack gives me two pair, it also creates some like straight possibilities. Whereas this turn is just like, it obviously didn't help anyone. Like, I don't think there's any chance anyone was improved by that three. Maybe the big blind has queen three, but like.
Yeah,
probably
okay.
the three didn't help anybody. It didn't improve any draws. I didn't get raised on the flop. At this point, I have the nuts, and I want to get more. So if I just shove here, it's kind of the same problem as betting big on the flop, right? Like, what's the worst hand I could have when I shove? Maybe a big diamond draw. Like, I could have, but it's like, even like, that's a pretty good hand. Like, that's barely a bluff. That's a hand that has a lot of equity. So there's not very much deception involved in betting large. And truthfully, like, it would be very reasonable for the big blind or for either of these players to fold like queen eight. I mean, the button probably doesn't have queen eight. The cutoff doesn't probably have queen eight. But like, if I shoved here, I would expect a good player to fold a hand like that, because the best they could hope for is I have some kind of high equity draw. And if I don't have that, if I have like the queen jack or whatever, they're absolutely smoked. So they're I wouldn't expect them to expect their equity to be very good against the shove. So I'm still trying to make a bet that is not screaming at my opponent, I must have a huge hand. Because this turn is so dry and nobody raised me on the flop, it is a good time for me to fire again with some sort of, and again, it can't be a complete bluff, but I think betting again here with like king jack, not king jack of diamonds, just like any king jack, gut shot and an overcard. With this action and this turn card for this bet size, I think that would be a good play. I don't think it would be a good play to shove something like king jack. So I'm trying to leave open the possibility that I might still be barreling with a fairly weak hand.
Right. And I guess, probably the flawed logic in my approach, the way I look at it is like, I've got like 16, 17 big blinds, and the pot already has like 12 or 13 big blinds. So let me just win this pot. Now it means so much to me, I don't want to let them see another card, because again, it's a pretty wet board. Now there are two possible flush draws. All those same straight draws that used to exist still exist. So, maybe that's flawed logic on my end. But yeah, kind of the old school way of thinking was you have to protect your hands. And from reading your books, I know that the solvers and just a deeper understanding of poker proves that protecting your hand doesn't mean hoping your opponent will fold when you're ahead. It means that you want to bet enough that he'll be able to call when you're ahead, even if it means sometimes you'll lose the pot.
Yeah, because I would like to protect my hand. I do think this bet does a decent job of that. Like, for the cutoff, I think at this point the cutoff is going to fold like a king jack or a king 10. Even getting 5-1,
yes.
Again, they still have to worry about the big blind.
Agreed.
Left act behind them. There's only one card to come, so I'm getting some protection. I'm not going to blow people off of diamonds, but at this point I'm a pretty big favorite against diamonds, and I do really want to avoid that scenario where I blow someone off of a dominated top pair. I think part of where the argument for shoving comes from is that there was a time when you would get called by top pair if you shoved here. Because people, it just looks like a draw, or people just can't fold top pair. And that's probably true in some, like, maybe I'm giving these random players too much credit. As we said, the player in the big blind is a pretty good player. But I think that when you're playing against tougher players, people will make that big laydown if you give them the chance. And I don't want to give them the chance, because as important as it is to deny equity, like, winning a big pot is also very important. Like, getting a big river bet paid off, getting turn and river bets paid off, as opposed to just shoving and taking it down. Those chips also do a lot to help you survive in the tournament.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. So you're basically saying, look, I'm treating this queen jack like it's the nuts because I have 20 big blinds, and I want to try to get 3 streets of value, and I'm not going to be overly concerned with whether or not I get sucked out on. Now, are there any river cards that you would plan on not betting? In other words, like if
absolutely, yeah. I think any ace, king, or diamond are all going to be bad to bet. I might still bet an 8 because I do have a blocker to the straight, but even that would be a little dicey. So yeah, probably about half the deck I'm going to not bet.
Right. Well, it does come the 6 of hearts on the end.
That's a good one.
And that's not any of the cards you just named. So our final board is Queen 9, 5, Tray 6, and there were 2 possible flushes, both of which missed. And
I think, do we give the full action on the turn? Because I bet 1/3 pot. The cutoff folded and the big blind called. So now it's heads up on the river.
Thank you. You're right. We didn't actually say that. So, yeah, when you made your bet, the player in position folded and the big blind, which is the player that I'm familiar with, called. And now he checks to you here on this 6 of hearts river. I mean, I guess we just follow through with the plan and put the rest in, right?
Yeah, that's a good. I think this. If I made a mistake in this hand, this is probably where I'm most likely to have erred. I bet 2/3 pot, which was not the rest of my stack. It's very possible that I should have bet the rest. I'm not sure right off exactly how much I had left. Well, actually, you know what I might have done here? I may have just bet everything but like 1 big blind, which I think is a good strategy. Just in general, I think it's so valuable to get dealt in with a single big blind that there's a lot, like whether you're bluffing or making like a thin value bet or whatever, not quite going all in, leaving yourself 1 big blind, you are called and lose. I think I don't always follow it, but when I remember to, I think that's just a good habit.
Yeah, it does appear that's what you did here, Andrew. I mean, yeah, it's 2/3 the pot, but it is almost your entire stack, unless I've really messed up how to do math in my head or something.
No, you're right. Yeah. So this is basically all in.
Okay, so you went almost all in there on the river and you got called. So why don't you reveal what our opponent had in this hand?
This player called me with 10-5. 10-5 of clubs, which means that they had middle pair with a backdoor flush draw on the flop. Bottom pair with a backdoor flush draw on the flop. They turned a flush draw, and then they still just had what is now 4th pair on the river, which means that they called me just hoping to beat a bluff, which is exactly what I was hoping for, right? Like when I bet, that was the whole conversation about using the small bet sizes on the flop and turn, was I was trying to choose sizes that were consistent with me bluffing. Now on the river, I'm making a much larger bet, and that's because at this point, I am going to have a polar range. So on the flop and turn, I was saying I want to be betting a less polar range because it's a multi-way pot. I'm going to be betting a more equity dense and merged range. But now on the river, it's heads up. River bets should always be, or at least in position, river bets should always be polar because there's no such thing as improving your hand once you're on the river.
Right.
So now I am going to use a big size. I'm bluffing or I have the functional nuts. As I've argued, and I think we're on the same page, this hand is the functional nuts. And so, if he calls me, it's going to be because this is credibly a bluff. And it's entirely possible that this player's thought process is, it's easy to find bluffs here. Like many draws missed, and most people don't make thin enough value bets in this situation. Many people, I think, would follow. I mean, including me a year ago. Like this is everything I'm talking about now. This is the cutting edge of my own knowledge.
Right.
Would have just shoved like the queen jack, the pocket aces, the pocket kings on the turn. So I can imagine the logic where this person says like, this doesn't make any sense unless it's like a set or something like really huge, because this person would have just shoved the turn if they had, so like, okay, they don't have queen jack, they don't have an overpair, like it's pretty easy for them to be bluffing too much here, and so they decide to call with so I don't think this is a great bluff catcher. He is blocking some of my bluffs. Like I think having a 10 in his hand is not great when he's bluff catching, but it does make sense if he believes that I'm going to be bluffing too much or not value betting enough in this spot. And yeah, so I mean, I was proud of myself that I did in fact find the thin value bet and the bet sizing that enabled me to tell that story credibly.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, this is a great hand. It really is. And the interesting part for me is just, it turns out I would have shoved the turn, so I'm you a year ago, and I'm happy to be there.
I mean, you probably would have gotten called because he had a pair and a flush draw, or you would have denied a lot of equity to him. I don't think my line is that much better than shoving. So I guess I don't want to like demoralize people who are listening. I think poker is a process of, it's diminishing returns, right? Like when you're earlier in your poker career, you are trying to plug big leaks and thinly veiled brag. Like I'm at a point where I've plugged the big leaks. So, it is just kind of a question of like, how can I keep doing things a little bit better? Every rule that you've ever learned in poker was not a rule. It was something that someone told you to keep you out of trouble, or something that you sort of taught yourself, a heuristic that you gave yourself to. And, those heuristics are going to be good like 9 times out of 10. But when you're playing in a tough field, like everyone knows those rules. Everyone is getting the 9 times out of 10 right. And the way to have an edge is you've got to find the 1 time out of 10 that's harder to find, the time that you should actually make an exception to whatever the rule is. So it's not that the rule is going to serve you badly. In many cases, you're going to get the same result. Sometimes you'll even get a better result. But on balance, if you learn these exceptions well, or that's what getting better at poker is, I guess, is just like constantly revisiting the things that you were previously taking for granted and saying like, well, maybe there's sometimes where that's not true.
Yeah, and that's why those of us that stay in it for more than, I'd say, 3 to 5 years, it's because we actually do love finding all those little tiny leaks to plug one at a time and to just try to keep up with the ever-changing, landscape in the game. So, I mean, I know you've been around probably longer than I have, and I started playing seriously around, 2002. So.
Oh no, that makes you poker older than me.
Wow, hey, that's something I can hang my hat on anyway. Well, this is great, Andrew. I mean, I just always appreciate getting a chance to speak with you and get your wisdom about the game and just getting inside your mind a little bit about how a top player like yourself approaches these spots. And maybe the next time I'm on the turn with 20 big blinds and my instincts are telling me to shove because he could have a draw and I don't want to get sucked out on, maybe I'll look and remember this hand and just play maybe a little bit better that day.
Well, thanks for your kind words. It has been a pleasure catching up with you as well.
Well, if any of my listeners want to get in touch with you for coaching or anything else, of course they can listen to the podcast, and you can follow that at thinkingpoker.net. But what else do you want people to know before we say goodbye?
The Thinking Poker Daily podcast that we mentioned, I think that's it for people who enjoy like the strategy. I mean, honestly, our strategy conversations are probably even a little easier to follow than what I just did here. This was sort of rapid fire, but and Carlos is a little better at explaining things sometimes than I am. But patreon.com/Thinking Poker Daily, you can get that for as little as $5 a month. And then if you're interested in like one-on-one coaching, or I also do, if you miss my videos on Tournament Poker Edge, I do custom videos, which means you can send me a hand history, you can send me a database, you can just send me questions that you have, and I'll record a video of myself talking through it. I might even use a tool like GTO Wizard or something to help illustrate certain concepts. I'll make a video for you based on your hands and your questions, and I actually do that for half the cost of one-on-one coaching, so that can be a good option for people. That's Andrew at thinkingpoker.net. You can also message me on, I started to say on Twitter, but on X. You can message me on X. I'm at Thinking Poker.
I think I'll always call it Twitter.
Yes,
and he is.
I will. It will always be a smirk in my voice if I ever call it X.
Yeah, and he is a great follow on Twitter at Thinking Poker. Andrew at thinkingpoker.net. Get in touch with him. He's one of the brightest minds in the game. Andrew Brokos, thank you so much for being a repeat guest. I don't even know how many times now here on the TPE podcast.
Thank you. It's great talking to you.
So for Andrew Brokos and for everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, and with special thanks as always to our very generous sponsor, ACR Poker, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas Plays. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Carry my, no she can't read a mile, hold the face. She's got to love nobody. Carry my, no she can't read a mile, hold the face. She's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambler